2013, independent filmmaker Joey Lever asked, "Those films that require Hollywood funding and are made in New York, involving Spider-Man, can we do that in Leicester with a very tiny budget of approximately $500? The result was a feature-length Spider-Man film that was free to view on YouTube, and who could complain about that? The film received a colossal amount of recognition from passionate Spider-Man fans who thought it was great. And you know what? I was right there with them. I don't consider Joey Lever as a filmmaker comparable to, say, Star Wars Theory or Made Legit Media, because those are just more polished products. You see, if you consider those to be like fancy flashy cars, what Joey Lever makes is ultimately more like a rusty old minivan. It's dense, give it character, and it ultimately gets you to where you want to go. The film ended up being kind of a take on Ultimate Spider-Man, but with kind of a British twist. Like The Amazing Spider-Man, it did involve Peter Parker trying to prevent his research from falling into the hands of Oscorp to be used for malicious intent. It featured a brand new villain called Nightshade, who was kind of like a prototype for Green Goblin. Now the thing is, if you want to look at this objectively with any kind of credible review, you have to acknowledge the fact that this film left a lot to be desired. There were certainly a few performances that could have used extra takes, a few things that could have used a re-edit, and at best the ideas were derivative. There were a lot of moments of confused cinematography, there were a lot of moments of confused narrative, and sometimes the actors just looked confused as to what they were supposed to be doing. As a filmmaker, I don't hold this against Joey Lever at all. It's hard to get professional actors in your films, and when you're working with friends and family, it can be hard to be too critical of them at the time of filming, and ultimately what he gets out there does get its point across perfectly fine. And while there have been Spider-Man fan films that have been more coherent and better gelled together and just more polished, such as Made Legit Media's Marvel Knights Spider-Man series, it's safe to say they just don't have that spirit that Spider-Man Lost Cause has. It's a film that seems so drunk on its own ideas that you seem to find it contagious, and you're there with it. You can detect Joey's enthusiasm and excitement, and it's infectious, and that's a good feeling to have. So 2 years later, a sequel was announced, and with this sequel, it was always going to be interesting to see what Joey had learned from Spider-Man Lost Cause. You see, the thing about a YouTube movie and independent filmmakers is that the progress they make as they grow as filmmakers is much more clear than anything you'd get from Hollywood sequel progressions. And what Joey was approaching with Spider-Man 2: Another World was to use more professional technology and equipment, and take everything they learned with Spider-Man Lost Cause and just make it bigger and better. As well as that, it was a crossover with Heath Gleason's interpretation of Spider-Man from the fan film Intractable, which basically takes everything one could possibly know about Spider-Man and flips it on its head, in a very creative and clever way. Now, the truth be told, Spider-Man Lost Cause was not what you would deem a professional-looking product. And going into Spider-Man Another World, Joey had kind of the backing of his own professional company that he'd kind of put together and got up off the ground in that meantime. So naturally, expectations were kind of high, because there was definitely a spark of excitement with Spider-Man Lost Cause. So moving on to Another World, it certainly seemed like we were just going to get everything that we liked about the previous one and ramped up to better than ever. So I think many of us made the mistake of expecting a professional product this time, which leads us into Spider-Man 2: Another World. The film was originally intended for release in 2017, but there were a lot of behind-the-scenes issues in regards to what they wanted this story to really be, and it seemed to keep growing. What originally started out as a crossover between Joey Lever's Spider-Man and Heath Gleason's Spider-Man eventually grew into its own Spider-Verse, as well as that with the addition of Venom and the addition of Black Cat, and with all independent films, there were actors dropping out, having to be recast, replaced, and all sorts. The release date later changed to late 2018, and the film released a couple of days late and as only part one of the film. So naturally this had alarm bells ringing off, but I tuned in anyway because I was excited to see what Joey Lever had come up with. And we begin the film by learning a little more about Peter Parker's father, how he worked with Eddie Brock Sr. To find a cure for cancer, and they find it in an asteroid in the form of the symbiote. So immediately this is much clearer than it was in, say, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, because it's based on the Ultimate Comics, in that the Venom symbiote is the cure for cancer that Richard Parker and Eddie Brock Sr. are working on together. We then flash forward to see that the world pretty much knows who Spider-Man is at this point. He's in the news, he's fighting Electro, continuing off where the previous film left, and it's a very exciting sequence, actually. The special effects work is done really well, and I do love the idea of seeing a Spider-Man fight scene from the perspective of a news reporter for one of the introductory sequences. But the film struggles to maintain this sense of excitement that it begins with. Now, if you haven't seen the first film, I think this would be very lost on you, but basically Peter Parker is a very troubled man in this film, because of what happened to his friend in the end of Spider-Man Lost Cause when he was killed by Nightshade. It's made Peter very distant from the important things in his life. It's made him distant from Gwen Stacy. The whole thing just makes his life as Spider-Man a lot more attractive for him, and it gets even better still when he meets Black Cat, who's kind of like a cat burglar that's trying to, you know, get in his way and everything, and, you know, they have a bit of chemistry in the way that Spider-Man and Black Cat do, but to be honest, it doesn't really go anywhere. Yet. Part 2's not out yet. We learn a bit more about Eddie Brock and how unstable he is and everything, and how he's come into the possession of the Venom symbiote. The way this happens is, it's a long-running problem with this film, is that there's a lot of things in this story that are insulting to the intelligence. So, as a measure of containing the Venom symbiote, Peter puts it in a Tupperware box with a towel on the top. I thought Peter was supposed to be a genius, and it does seem to be something that they're trying to run with a little bit in this film, because there's the whole, he's trying to find the cure for cancer using his parents' research and everything, but then we just have this massive oversight, and it's not like a joke is made of it or anything, but inevitably the symbiote escapes, and there are times when the symbiote looks fantastic on screen, mainly when it's in jars and stuff, and there are times when I think it could be solved with maybe a quick color grade, maybe, but it doesn't look good in close-ups, and that's the thing, is there's a lot more CGI in this film than the first one, and the web-swinging sequences kinda work, kinda don't. They're an improvement on the first film, but and it ultimately leads to Eddie Brock getting the symbiote, he breaks out as Venom, and he goes off on kind of like a rampage. We also see that being Spider-Man is getting a little harder for Peter as well, with Venom now about. Peter meets a girl at a gas station while buying some food for himself, I guess, just to kind of, you know, mellow out after all that's been going on. And he gets talking, and she seems like a nice lady. They try to make us care about her, but then she gets taken down a dark alley by Venom and killed, and the blood kind of feels like it's on Spider-Man's hands. This film plays with the theme of trauma a lot from the events of the previous film and everything Spider-Man's had to go through, and I appreciate that this had a lasting after effect and they didn't just act like nothing ever happened here. But it's very hard to pick up from where you left off from the last time in this case. But anyway, this is kind of the stick that breaks the camel's back and causes Peter to turn to Madame Web, who basically sends him to another dimension to learn about the importance of being Spider-Man, and that's where we finish it. So if I were to try and summarize the plot, Peter deals with his inner demons while they manifest in someone else and goes on a special quest to find his true self. Yeah, it's an odd one. It's a really weird plot so far. I guess it's not fair to try and summarize it until we get to the next film, but the thing is, there's the assumption that this is half the film, we're halfway in, and, you know, it's still very unclear where it's going, not because there's a clever mystery to it, but because it's going down so many different paths at once. But as well as that, there are a lot of filmmaking goofs that were not an issue in the previous film that are here. Look at this shot of Spider-Man swinging. Look, he goes literally out of the frame before he reaches the top of the frame. Like, the mat is not properly lined up. Now watch this shot of the symbiote here. What was that all about? It just suddenly disappears for a second. Just a quick edit would have fixed that. Now, stuff like that is unacceptable, but it becomes especially intelligence insulting watching this guy graffiti on the wall and watching his hand motions, but actually seeing the graffiti as it goes up, and it could not possibly line up with those hand motions. There wasn't even an attempt to try and make that accurate, and there wasn't even an attempt to try and cover it up. It just is like that. This would work for a parody, but it doesn't work here. Now, could I do that better? No, I can't, which is why I do parodies. Another massive issue I have with this film that was kinda a minor issue in the previous one, is the use of notes to get stories and motivations across. See, it literally spells it out for you, but I guess they tried to make it kind of like it's just a Peter Parker character trait, is that he leaves notes laying around to remind himself of what to do. In this film, it's not even just him that does it. Eddie Brock does it. He does it. It happens everywhere he goes, but they use it so much in this film. It's ridiculous. Like, people don't just go leaving notes for themselves everywhere, because all this does is spell out for the audience what the character's motivations are. Unless it turns out that there's a twist where Peter Parker has Alzheimer's, and he just leaves these notes around for himself. But then explain why Venom does it. Now, as for Venom, we haven't seen him reach his final form yet. Okay, so that's fair, that's probably going to happen later in the film, but we do get a preliminary version of Venom, and his debut scene is just laughable. So, like, the Warden of Ravencroft or whatever is asleep in his apartment, and basically Venom rocks up, and in this form he's still kind of more humanoid than Venom would later go on to be, but it's more like a black latex sort of suit that just fits his form completely. He comes in with a hoodie over it, and he steps in while this Warden is asleep in bed, and then he takes off his clothes and then climbs on top of the Warden. I am sorry, I'm really sorry, like, to everyone involved in this for, like, ripping on this too much, but it's so obvious how sexual this looks. I don't even know what the intention was here, but why is it done so seductively? Why is there this passionate orange sort of light grade on it? Why does Venom so slowly sort of seductively put his hand on his chest, and then the little tentacle comes up? You can't avoid it. It's like something out of American Horror Story Murder House when the Rubber Man comes in. I think this ends up being ironically my favourite scene in the film, really. Like, it's crazy. And then there's this montage near the beginning of the film where they're trying to do like a heroes montage for Spider-Man, and we go through several different orchestral variations of Take On Me by Aha, and this montage doesn't, it kind of takes a pause in the middle to establish Peter and Eddie Brock's friendship a little bit. Meanwhile, Take On Me's still playing, but suddenly in a soft, almost kind of romanticized version of it.
Bioengineering, thanks to Dad. Our dads.
And it goes like this for a solid minute, with Peter Parker and Eddie Brock just talking about science while this really sentimental Take On Me plays. And then suddenly boom, it's back into the orchestral version with Spider-Man swinging around and stuff. It's crazy, like, it's just nuts. And there are so many instances where you can tell that Joey Lever is having a lot of fun with what Spider-Man's powers can do, and like what sort of funny little antics he could be up to, but they don't work in the context of the scenarios that this film presents it with. And you just watch it wondering, what's he doing up there? Why would he go up there? Why would he do that? Like, it's not even like these are relaxation things. There's like a bit where Aunt May comes home and Peter is stuck to the ceiling in his Spider-Man suit and stuff. But I guess he was just hanging out there before, because it's never really explained as to why that's going on. And that's the problem with this, is the film is so drunk on its own ideas that it kind of relies on that, and suddenly the flaws really do gang up on the film. There are certainly more flaws in this one than there were the previous film, which is actually kind of upsetting, because I think, like, with Paper Plane, Joey Lever has proven that he's capable of being a legitimately good filmmaker outside of just the enthusiastic passion project fan film genre. With this, it's back on relying on the fact that it is a fan film on YouTube. Don't expect too much from it. And that's just kind of really unfortunate, especially given the amount of time that went into development here. But I do not want to say that Joey Lever doesn't take pride in his work, because if you know the guy, he's a very nice guy, he's a very, very busy guy. He's got a lot on his plate throughout his life. And he's even delayed part 2 to make sure it gets polished up a bit, and he's going to do a re-release including part 1 where everything is fixed, all the issues are fixed and everything. I don't think it will fix anything like the Venom sequence or the jarring Take On Me sequence, but it will still like fix like a lot of the technical bugs, because in the state that it's in right now, you don't have to look out for the technical bugs to nitpick, they find you. And then I have my other problems with the fact that like the poster for Madame Web and her psychic stuff, it's got typos on it, and it's very obviously in frame and everything. It bugs me that there's a lot of pride being taken with certain aspects of it, but for parts where maybe Joey Lever doesn't have the time, that these things aren't necessarily outsourced. Maybe they could be. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to really say right now, because at the end of the day, it is a fan film. You're going with different expectations. You're getting a free Spider-Man film to watch for free. And it's enjoyable. I've watched it all the way through. It's entertaining enough, but it's just kind of sad that it's such a drop in quality from the first film in so many regards. I'm really hoping that part 2 gives us a resolution to all of this stuff that makes sense, because right now I'm just worried that there's too much on this film's plate. There's no story so far, and it is relying strictly on ideas and thrills, and while they do make up for some of its misgivings, it doesn't excuse the fact that this is the downgrade that it is from the first film. But if you've watched this video, I want you to take this as kind of an advertisement for the film. Like, do go see it for yourself. Like, check it out on YouTube and show Joey Lever some support, because ultimately this is a passion project, and it is a really nicely intentioned labour of love towards the web slinger, and you can tell that, you can see that from the film. Did you enjoy this video? If so, and you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. Otherwise, if you've subscribed already, I'm always glad to see you here. Comment below and discuss what you think of this film if you've seen it already, and enjoy your day. Thank you for watching.